For this video, we're going to be looking at how we can design this condiments or barbecue box using SketchUp. This is the basic design that we're going to be creating. We'll see how we get to this point in a few minutes. A few other things to have a look at is this version of it where we can see the dimensions. So we're basically making a box that's approximately, or not approximately, exactly 200 millimeters square. It's going to be 70 millimeters high with a 3mm base, so that's shown by these measurements here. And the handle piece that cuts through the middle here is actually going to be another 70 millimeters tall, and that's one piece. So we've got 70 millimeters up the side and another 70 millimeters going up, so it's 140 mil altogether. We've got rebate joints in each corner. We have housing joints and crossover joints in the middle here, and all the wood that we're designing with is 12 millimeters in thickness, which is the standard wood that we're currently using. One other picture I'll show you is this exploded view. So here we can see that taller piece that's 140 millimeters wide with part of the crossover joint in it, and again here we have one side piece with a housing joint only, and that's a matching pair, so we only design this once and make two of them. And we have this piece over here with the housing joint and rebate joints on the side, and again this is the matching part on the other side, and we can see our base there as well. So we'll be designing 5 unique pieces, but in fact there's obviously 7 pieces that actually make up the box itself when it's made. Some of the design options you'll have, apart from obviously colours and so forth, is possibly changing the handle shape and even design and materials. You might decide not to have a simple crossover. So again, if we go back to the first picture, you might decide to cut this off, for example, and have some other form of handle. You might decide to rearrange the way these cross instead of being exactly in the middle. You might decide to put plates or other things on here that then hold things like cutlery in position, and a whole lot of other things. But this is the base design, I guess, that we're all going to work with to be from the beginning, and then you'll be able to customize from there. So let's have a look at how we actually go about doing this. So we're going to come in to SketchUp. I should know how to do that. And the first thing when you start a new SketchUp, of course, is to make sure that we're working in millimeters. So I'm coming over here to the solid inspector, also the inspector in general, and making sure that I am working in millimeters. Quite often when you first begin, you might be in inches or even feet, so make sure you're working in millimeters. Precision and so forth don't matter, you can just go to defaults, but definitely making sure we work in millimeters. And of course we can close that down. I tend to also get rid of the little person. We don't need them, we're not going to be designing something of that size. Okay, so the way I would normally go about designing this, well, there's a few different ways. You could start with a full top-down view and then pull everything into the size it should be, but I like to start with designing the pieces one by one. So I'm going to start with probably the most complex piece, which is the one with the rebate and housing joints on them. And so I'm going to start by drawing myself a rectangle. And again, I don't really care about size at the moment, because as soon as I let go of that mouse, I'm going to type the correct dimensions so they come in this box down here on the bottom right. So we know the box should be 200 millimeters long, and it's also 12 millimeters wide. And we know which order, of course, to do this, because we've drawn deliberately a very clear rectangle with one long side and one shorter side. So if we look at these measurements, the longer side is obviously the first number in this case, and the shorter side is the second number. So if I just type in 200, comma, for the two different measurements, and 12, that's going to, in a second, create a rectangle that's 200 millimeters long in one direction and 12 millimeters in the other. Press enter, and of course that's what's happened. And it is really, really small. So remember, this is not as obvious with perspective because we're zoomed right out at the moment. So I'm going to just use my mouse or the controls to zoom in. But this is actually now drawn the correct size. The other thing I like to do is orbit quite a bit. Now, if you've got a mouse with a wheel, you can usually press the center wheel down to orbit. Mine doesn't seem to be working at the time, so I'm pressing O to change to the orbit tool, so I can also orbit around. That's going to be a really useful tool. Scroll in and out with the scroll wheel, and usually press and hold the scroll wheel to orbit, but I'm choosing to use the keyboard at the moment. So we've got the right size for a piece of wood, but now what we'll do is we'll use the push-pull tool, and we're going to choose that and pull it up. And again, I don't care about the actual dimension because I'm going to type it in, again seeing that the 70 came up down here, press enter so it goes to the right size. So I now have a piece of wood, so to speak, that is the same as a piece of wood that I would cut. Alright, so this is exactly the same as what I would cut. 200 millimeters long, 70 millimeters high, and 12 millimeters in thickness. Now I'm going to orbit round to the other side. This is going to be outside of my box. I'm going to orbit round to this side so I can see. And I'm now going to cut in the rebate joints. Now there's a number of ways you could measure these. You can of course use your, and actually I'll do two different ways, one on each end. So one way we could do this is simply to take the tape measure, which we just need to remember where that's gone. Actually it's down here, that's right, and choose the tape measure. And from the edge, I'm going to measure in, making sure it's on the red axis, so it's following that along. I'm going to measure 12 millimeters, that's how deep our rebate should be. I'm then going to draw a line that connects from that intersection to that intersection there. That gives me a new shape that I can choose, and then I'm going to take my push-pull tool, and I'm going to push that in, and again, I don't care about the depth itself, because I'm going to press 6. You see that down the bottom right, I press enter. So that's now taken out a half of that piece of wood, just like a rebate joint should be. And I will use my eraser to rub out this construction line to get rid of it. So that's a perfectly valid way of creating that rebate joint. Let's have a look at the other end. I'll just zoom out and rotate around a bit. So one other way I might like to do this, and this is actually maybe a bit quicker, is to just draw another rectangle. So if I start in the corner and I go down to the bottom, now I know how tall it should be, which is 70, and I also know this width, which at the moment is approximately 24.41. But if I put 70, 12, I've got another rectangle drawn on top of this main one that's the right size, and again I just use my push-pull tool, putting in 6 as the depth, and I've also got the same outcome. So as we can see, there are often multiple ways to shape or design. The idea here is that you've drawn again the size of the rebate and pushed and pulled it to make it the right depth. So we've got two perfectly designed rebate joints, one on each end. Now, for the default just crossover, we end up with a housing joint directly in the middle. And again, a housing joint in this case is just like a rebate joint, but instead of being on an end, it is somewhere along the length of the wood. So we want it directly in the middle. So again, there's a few ways you can go about this. The way I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my pencil tool for the moment, and I'm just going to find the center. Now I don't actually have to measure, because one of the great things is as I go along an edge like this, there we go, SketchUp will show me the midpoint, the middle of this whole length, alright? So there's my midpoint. I can very easily draw a straight line. It shows up as blue because I'm going down the blue axis to the midpoint at the bottom. So this is a line exactly in the middle. And then what I'm going to use is my tape measure to draw from that line across, again making sure it stays on the red, and again I don't care how big I make it because I'm going to type 6 in. And the reason I'm doing 6 is I want a housing joint that's exactly 12 in total, but I want it 6 on each side of the line, so I'm going to do 6 on each side of the line there to give me this sort of space. And then I could either use the pencil to draw down on both of these, or again I might just use my rectangle tool to go from that corner to that corner there to create this space that I can then cut out a bit like I did with my rebates. But before I do that, I'm just going to do a bit of tidy up. I'm going to get rid of these construction lines that I don't need, and I'm also very carefully going to get rid of the center line. If I didn't get rid of the center line, what you'll see is these are two separate shapes. When I push and pull them, you see I'm doing them separately. I'm just doing Control Z to undo. So just to make it a bit easier for myself before I go ahead, I'm just getting rid of that center line so that again, this is now one shape. So push that in a bit, doesn't matter how much because I'm going to press 6 to make it go exactly halfway. So now what I have here is a piece that has two rebate joints and a housing joint exactly in the middle. Before I go any further, I'm going to highlight this whole section, just selecting and dragging over the whole lot, making sure that all the lines and faces are selected. I'm going to right click and I'm going to turn this into a component. And turning it into a component means that you can do things like copy it and move it around. It means that you can keep it from getting accidentally changed by something else. So I'm going to make this component. And I'm going to give it an appropriate name. So I'm going to call this side with rebates. So just type that in and press OK. So now you can see that's a component. If I click off it and click on it again, you see it's a whole piece. Anytime there is a, Anytime that there's a component, you have to double click on the component to be able to edit it. If you're not double clicked and seeing this dotted line around it, then you're not editing the actual component. You're just editing on top of it. And then if you want to get out, you just click or double click somewhere else. So that's a component now. We could just copy this, turn it around and make the opposite side, but let's do the other piece now, So the other piece I want is going to come out the side. So the way I'm going to go about drawing this is I'm going to build it off of the piece I've already got. So I'm going to use my orbit tool just to rotate around a bit so I can see this side, let's say. And I'm going to draw again a rectangle, taking advantage of the fact that I already have the size and shape that I need here. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, and remember I haven't double clicked on the component, so I've actually drawn a rectangle on top of this at the moment. It's a whole separate shape. And I can take my push and pull tool now and pull out the other piece. Now we want a box that's 200 wide on each side, but we have to take into account the rebates, which this rebate here is going to be 6, and on the other side there will be 6. So the whole side piece that we're making now has to be 200 minus 6 and minus 6, which of course is 188. And I'm just going to undo this because what I want to do is pull that out. Again, it doesn't matter how much. I'm going to type 188, so it comes in the bottom right hand little box, and press enter. So now I've got the piece that I want. And what I'll do now is I'll orbit round. I'll select this component and I'm going to right click and choose to hide it because I just want to work with this piece at the moment. So you can see it's hidden away, and at any stage when I want to get that back, I can simply come over to the little glasses that we have over here and I can unhide. Right, so I could either unhide all the pieces, the last piece, etc. that I just did. So if I said all now, you see that piece comes back. So I'm just going to hide it again and I'll just pop away this display. So orbiting around to here, and just like we did before, we want to put a housing joint directly in the center. So we use exactly the same methodology. We're going to start by finding the center point that's already built in. There it is, and draw a line straight down. We're going to take our tape measure and draw 6 millimeters on each side. There we go, and then we will use our rectangle tool to go from that marking point to that marking point. We're always taking advantage of the locking points that get created when we draw things. And like before, we'll do a bit of cleanup first. Clean up that center line that we don't need. Be careful you don't accidentally delete a face or some line that you do need, like that. That would be pretty bad. So if you do, just undo it. And again, I'm going to take the push-pull tool, push it in a bit, and then press 6 and enter to get the exact measurement I want. So if I orbit around this one now, we'll see that we have a piece with a housing joint in it as well. And just like before, I'm going to select everything here, being careful that it all gets selected. You can see because I missed some in this corner, it didn't all select. So just when you are selecting things, be careful you get absolutely everything that you want. And I'm going to turn this into a component as well, and I'll call this what should I call it? Housing side. That'll do. And press OK. So I've got 2 components now. And what we're going to see now, let's unhide. So we'll unhide all. So we can see we've got 2 pieces that are making a nice perfect corner the way we want. So to do the opposite 2 sides, we're not going to redraw it all. We're going to take advantage of these 2 components. We're going to create a copy of this one and spin it around to come across here, and a copy of this one spun around to come across here. So let's do that first. So select this one, simple Control V, copy and paste, and just drag across. So we can see it's there, but it's facing the wrong way again. So what we want is to come over here to this cross tool, which we're going to change to be the rotation tool. We're very carefully going to come over and put our tape measure, our protractor on. Now I like to work from a corner, and you have to make sure that your protractor's facing the way you expect. So I'm going to rotate around this axis, not, for example, around the red axis, which would twist it. So I'm very, very carefully coming here, click. I usually like to go along the edge a bit and click again, and that gives you that rotation point. So where we first click is the rotation point, and the second click was sort of where we're rotating at. And again, you can do it manually, or again, look down the bottom right, you can see that as I rotate, there's the exact amount. We know we're going from this way, we want to spin it exactly around, so that's 180 degrees. So in reality, I can just type 180 and press enter, and I've got a perfect rotation. Alright, now be careful you don't accidentally rotate again without meaning to. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually move this piece across. So again, I'm going to come over to the same place and go back to using this 4-arrow move tool. I'm just going to zoom in a bit, because what I want to do is take advantage again of the locking points. I want to lock this corner, so where this corner is, to this corner here. So if you think about this joint, this part of the rebate would be joined to this corner here. So if I click and hold on that corner and I bring it along, I should be able to bring my cursor or my mouse to that, and you can see how it locks in place. Right? That's really useful. It's locking in place for us. So those two corners have met, and that's exactly what we want. So we've now got two components joined with this side. And we're going to do the same here. So remember, we select it, just simply going to copy and paste it and bring it across just out of the way, roughly where we want. We're going to come over here and get our rotation tool, making sure that we maybe start from a corner and move along the line a bit. Once we know it's rotating the way we want, we can just type in the exact amount we want, so 180 again in this case. Then I'm going to come over here and change the tool back to the movement tool. I'm going to think about what's going to go where. So again, this corner is going to lock in place with that one. So I'm going to grab and hold that corner and try and bring it roughly in place until it locks in. You might need to really zoom in to see it, right? So just to make sure it really locks in place. And there we go. We have our 4 sides done. As always, you should save regularly. I haven't actually named this yet, so let's pretend we've gone ahead and named this, and of course save regularly so you don't lose any work. Now the next thing I'm going to do is actually put the base on this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to orbit round to underneath. I'm just physically rotating around so I can see the bottom. And again, I'm going to take advantage of the corners that we can snap into. So I'm going to get my rectangle tool, and I'm simply going to go from this far corner here across to this far corner there. And I'm literally drawing a big box that fits over that. And then I'm going to use my push-pull tool, grabbing that and pulling it down, and then just typing 3 for 3 millimeters, pressing enter. And again, if I orbit round to a better view, you'll see I've done that. So maybe if I undo that, and I'll show you the push-pull again. So here we go, pushing and pulling that down, but I want it to be 3 millimeters, press enter, and there we go. Now that is not a component yet, so that's another thing we need to do. So let's orbit to see a bit better. Let's now use our selection tool, select that one and right-click hide. Let's hide that one, let's hide that one, and let's hide that one. So all we have now is the base. And the reason I do that is because I can just highlight like this and turn this into a component as well. If you've got any other components there or pieces and you highlight them, they become part of this component. So you can actually join components into other components to make complex pieces. But I just want the base to be, so it's easy to hide everything else to make selection easier. So I'm going to make that a component. I'll just call that base. Alright, so now I've got lots of components there. And again, if I want to bring them back, I'll just unhide all, and there we go. So all the different components so far, and the base now as well. So we're getting close. We need to do our one crossover piece with a a cross piece in it, and then we need to do the second one with the bigger handle piece. So to keep it the same as the original drawing, we'll do our first one straight across here, and this one with the handle will be drawn as that piece going across this way. So we're going to do it very much the same as we started before. So let's hide some pieces we don't need. So we're going to hide that piece, we're going to hide that piece. Let's hide this one as well. And then let's hide this base. We don't need it. We just want one piece to start from. So I'm going to zoom in quite a bit to see this. Alright. And again, I'm going to take advantage of the corners. So I'm going to draw my box again from this corner here up to this corner, which will create a rectangle on that surface. Remember, it's not part of the component, it's a separate piece right now. And again, if I think about it, it's just like when I drew this piece, I've got to take into account that part of the housing joint which has 6 millimeters, and on the opposite side will be 6. So just like this piece, I want to end up with a piece that's 188 across. So I'm going to take my push-pull tool, drag out any amount, and type 188 in. Alright, so now I've got a piece again. I'm going to now hide this component because I don't want to accidentally do anything to it. So I can really just focus on this piece now. So what I want is to cut out for the crossover piece the half section in the middle. So a little bit like I did with the housing joint, I'm going to start firstly by finding the middle. And again, taking advantage of the built-in midpoint, just draw a line down the middle there. And just like before, again, I'm also going to draw with my tape measure, which of course I've lost. Where'd he go? I always forget where it goes. Oh, it's right there looking at me. So from this center line just drew, I'm going to go 6 millimeters across, because still got to take into account a 12 millimeter piece in total. But I want to go halfway down. So again, I'm just going to take my tape measure, and again, I could guess or work it out, but again, I know this whole piece is 70 millimeters tall. So again, go down a certain amount, and instead of typing 70, I'm going to type 35. So I've got a measurement line that's exactly halfway down. Just like before though, I'm going to take my rectangle tool and take advantage of all these locking points we've made and create a rectangle there that locks. Again, like before, use my eraser to clear out extra things we don't need, these construction lines, this center line, and that part there, because we just want this piece. And again, I'm going to push and pull this out. Now I might just orbit a bit more so we can see it. That's a better view. And if I push and pull that piece out so it's level with the edge, you can see I've now cut that piece out. Okay. Before I do anything else, I am going to turn this into a component as well. So highlight, select everything, right click to make a component, and I will call this not housing, crossover. We'll call it crossover. Alright, so again, if I show everything, you can see that piece in relation to the rest of it. It's perfectly in place because I used all the right measurements and I started off from that gap that's already there. So the last thing I need to do is the piece across here, which is also going to have the opposite part of this housing in it. So coming up from the bottom, it's going to be again 188 across to take into account this, but instead of being 70 tall, it's going to be 140 tall. Okay, so 70 plus another 70 for the handle. So just like before, let's start with something we have. So let's maybe start with this piece over here. So let's hide everything else that we don't want. So hide everything else because we don't want to accidentally edit anything. We're going to start just like before, taking what we have, which is locking point from one to the other. We're going to pull that out to be 188, remember, because that takes into account the 6 on each side for the housing joint. And then we're also going to hide away this component now that we don't want. Okay, so orbiting around so we can see it a bit better. Now there's two ways we can go about this. We could fix the height now, or we could fix it later. I'm going to fix it now actually. So we've got a piece that's the right size and it's to the top actually. If I bring everything back for a second, let's unhide all. You can see how it's just to that height. Oh, something didn't come back. Why is that? That's interesting. I seem to have lost a piece. Well, if that happens, it's not the end of the world. I'll just triple check I haven't hidden it. Now, I know I could technically just edit this out of the video, but let's use it as a point of learning. So, okay, we seem to have lost a piece. Not a problem. We'll just copy that piece again, and we'll quickly re-rotate it. So we would need to get our rotation tool. We need to choose from a corner across, make sure it's rotating the way we want, yep, and put it in 180, and then we need to bring it back in place. So changing that back to the movement tool, and we'll take that corner there and lock it into that there. So I don't know what happened, but that's the sort of thing that can happen. So again, it's a good reason to use components, because if you do make a mistake or something goes wrong, you can often just replace it with a copy of a previous component. But anyway, what I was talking about is how this piece across here is not tall enough for the handle. So now that we see that, we can just take that piece and pull it up by another 70. So we're just typing 70 to get the full height. So you can now see how that works. Let's hide off all the... I might have pressed erase before instead of hide. I think that's probably what I did. And if you look back through the video, you might see me actually doing that. Hide everything off, though, that we don't want, so we can just, again, work on this piece. Now, what I need here is a cutout that's around the middle again, but only goes up 35 to allow for the crossover joint. So it's exactly like we've been doing this whole time, where I'm going to start by taking advantage of the middle point with my pencil and drawing a straight line down to the opposite middle point. There it is. I'm again going to measure 6 millimeters from that line across on both of them. So 6 millimeters, making sure it's carefully on the axes. Then I'm going to use my tape measure to go up again 35, just like before. And again, I'm going to draw a rectangle, taking advantage of these locking points that were created. Take my eraser to clean up construction lines and lines that I don't need. And just like before, use my push-pull tool. In fact, I'll just orbit again to a better angle, maybe like that. And use the push-pull tool to push that out. And you can lock it to an edge. So if I lock it to that edge, it's the same as saying the back. And if I orbit round, you'll see that's nice and empty. Okay, so that will now lock in place with the other piece. And again, I'm going to select everything here and make this one a component, and I'll call this crossover with handle. Okay, and technically now if I unhide all the pieces and do a little bit of better orbiting, I do in fact have all my pieces. So I've got the two sides with the housing joints on it, I've got the two sides with housing and rebates, I've got a piece that does the crossover, and I've got the other bigger piece that the handle needs to go in. So the last thing I haven't designed is my handle. So again, what I'm going to do is hide off all these things, so just focusing on that piece. So just lots of hiding, lots of showing to make it easy to see. I'm just going to focus on this piece again. So what I might do here is, first of all, I've got to double click. Now don't forget, this is a component, so if I didn't do that, what I would have, let's say I draw a rectangle just randomly there. I think that's part of that model, but if I hide this component for a second, you'll see that that rectangle is actually there. It was a separate rectangle, so that's not what I want. I have to double click to get this dotted line to show that I'm editing this component. So now if I draw a rectangle on there, it would be part of this particular component. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to start from the bottom. I'm going to draw a 70 millimeter line up. The reason I've done that is this is the top of the rest of the box. So I don't want to do anything in this space because that would be too low. Then what I'm going to do is decide how I want my handle to look. So this is really where you get a bit of customization, because you might want to have a circular handle, you might want to do little holes, you might want to do a different shape. Just remember that whatever you do, you have to leave enough material for it to, be strong enough. If you're going to lift this up, it has to have some strength. So, if you are going to just leave it as the wood, I would strongly encourage you to maybe leave at least 20 millimeters, so 2 centimeters on either side. So I'm using, again, just my tape measure, drawing down and telling it to be exactly 20, which is 20 millimeters, across this way 20, and across this way 20. Essentially what I've done is I've created a space here, which is the place that I can work in. Anything else needs to stay to be strength, to give us strength. So at the very most basic level, what I might do is now draw a rectangle in here that I'm happy with. All right, I might push and pull that out so that it is gone. There you go. And I've created a workable handle. Okay, rubbing out the construction lines that I don't need, being careful not to rub out things I do need, and that would be a completely functional handle. But I might want to make that a little bit better. So one of the things I might want to do, for example, is just round off these edges a little bit. So I can do something like using the corner tool. So I tend to like this tool here. And again, work out where I want it to go from so I get a nice angle. Okay, you want to make sure it's on the face, not off it, so there you go, like that maybe. And again, I can push and pull that angle piece out to give it a nice curve. Do the same on the other side, so I'm going to rotate round. Again, use that angle tool. I probably should have done some sort of measurement to make sure that they're in the right places, but I'm just sort of freehanding it for this demo right now. And again, push and pull that out to round it out. Okay, I might want to do the same on the inside of this, so instead of having just this sharp corner, maybe I wanted these to be rounded, so instead of a rectangle I might have done an oval, or before I pushed and pulled it out I might have put those curves in and then pushed and pulled it to make it a bit more of a rectangular shape with rounded edges. And I can basically have some fun designing a nice handle. But again, when I'm done, I can just double click outside of that and that component is now all done. And if I now again show, or unhide I should say, all the pieces, there we go, we can see all the different pieces that make up our box. The one last thing I'll quickly remind you of, if you haven't done it for a while, is putting dimensions in. So again, if you come in to where the tape measure is and you pop out the little menu, you'll see this one here, which is dimensions. And if you basically click from one point to another point and then pull your mouse out, you'll get a set of dimension lines, which is really, really useful to make sure you know. So let's say, like I did here, I kind of free-handed this rectangle in the end, but maybe I want to know what size that actually came out as. So I can basically go from here to here, and there you go, I see that I need to cut 148. But how far was it from the end? Well, let's see, if I go from there, try that again, if I go from there across to this edge, I can see that it is 20. Alright, how tall was it? Well, from there to there, bring it out, it's actually 30.18. So when I make this, I might make that 30, which again, I should probably design that properly here. But if not, you know, if I'm happy to try and make it exactly to that size, I now know that I need to cut it at 30.18 millimeters. And of course, you can do the dimensions wherever you want. And that is the process for creating your barbecue box as a starting point. Generally speaking, in my class, I then expect you to go off and modify the design. Certainly do things like colors, think about materials, think about other things you could do to this, but you should be able to design completely and to the correct sizing what you want to do, and then from there we can look at materials and resources that you might need to build this. And just like I did before, the great thing is now, in theory, you can take these pieces and you can explode them out like I did, just by moving them out a bit. Take that one there. You can do things like hold down shift, for example, to lock it in to a certain axis, like that. So maybe I should have locked that one in there. So you can break it apart so that you can see all the different pieces. You can rotate around and look at them. You can obviously then get into them individually and check all your measurements. And then if you need to, you can always put them back together again. Just like a bit of Lego, basically. Just again, like we did before, taking advantage of the locking points to bring everything in piece by piece. Alright, I'll leave you with that. Please go off and have a go for yourself. Start by just essentially copying what I've done to get the base model, but then certainly go ahead and start thinking about your design elements and how you're going to improve on this design overall.